Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Duke Ong with Tri-City Equity Group. For this installment of the educational series, we're going to outline the general timeline and sequence of events that occurs from start to finish of a multifamily acquisition from the eyes of a passive investor. With me is my co-host, Vince Gibbons.
Hey, Duke, excited for this one. I know there's a lot of mystery about what the timeline is of like, okay, from start to finish, what happens, in between time. So this is going to be a very informative lesson on breaking down from the LP's eyes what you should expect at each step of the way, and then also maybe some of the behind the scenes things like what the sponsorship team is doing during these times that you might not hear a whole lot of activity from them.
So assuming that you're on the sponsors list, first you will get a call or email from the sponsor letting you know that they have a deal under contract that they would like to show you. This would normally happen within the first week or so of putting it under contract. Then the sponsor will set up a call or a webinar introducing the deal and the general characteristics of the property and the proposed financing structure and some general numbers. Since the due diligence period has just begun, the sponsor won't have a lot of information or projections at this point. They're merely trying to get the word out and gauging investor interest. Then from here, the sponsor will direct you to reach out to them if you're interested in the offering to discuss further.
Got it. So that's the first week is you just get notified, hey, we may have a deal going on. We have a deal under contract, and they're just trying to drum up interest. The sponsorship team is drumming up interest during that first week. Like I said, they're going to do that first webinar or call, or maybe if you're close with them, they'll do a face-to-face meeting. Just introduce the deal, kind of see the interest of who's interested in the thing. So that's the first week. And then from there, you may not hear a whole lot from them over the next 2-3 weeks. That's because the sponsorship team is going to be doing heavy due diligence. They're going to be running. This is the time where it's just a frenzy of activity on behind the scenes as they're doing the property inspections. They're getting all the legal paperwork and the SEC documents drafted. They're building the pitch deck for the investors, the pitch deck for the lenders. They're reaching out to lenders, having many meetings, lenders, management teams, boots on the ground, project management teams. So all of this activity during this due diligence period, because it's very time constrained per the contract, the purchase and sale agreement, they may only have 20 or 30 days to completely vet the property out physically, financially, start building the contracts out. So they're going to be heavily focused on that. So during this time, you may not hear a whole lot from them outside maybe some quick calls or some quick email updates during this time. Once the due diligence period ends, you're usually notified either by another webinar, another phone call, another in-person visit, where they're going to update you the status of the deal. Maybe they found something during due diligence and they decided, we're not going to move forward with this property. We uncovered a serious, physical condition with the property, and the cost to fix it is not worth the deal, so we're going to walk from the deal. Or maybe the numbers of the deal, the financials, after they start digging into them, changed a little bit than what was originally advertised in the broker's offering memorandum. It happens sometimes. The numbers might be a little bit too optimistic. So once they actually start getting in and reviewing things like the rent roll, the T12s, profit loss statements, taxes, they may see that this property financially isn't as stable as they originally thought, and they might be backing out. So that's one option. The other option or scenario is maybe they did find some things and they were able to go back and negotiate with the seller a price reduction on the property or a credit on the property in order to stay in the deal. Like say, hey, we found out that the roofs are bad and we want the price drop, $40,000 or something like that, and the seller conceded to that request, and they're updating you, hey, we got a big win, we got the price reduced, $50,000, $100,000, something like that. So those are usually the scenarios that happens, or the third scenario is, hey, everything's good, everything checked out like we thought. We're going to continue to press. So that's around that 30-day mark since you've been originally notified of the deal. From then, over that next week or so, the sponsorship team will hold another webinar call or in-person meeting if it's a small group, or they're just have a really good relationship with them. They might meet you in person, and this is going to be their first big presentation of the deal. By this time, they have a really good idea of the property's condition, physically and financially. They have a business plan built. They have lenders. Around this time, the lenders' terms should be pretty solid on what they're going to offer for the debt, the financing of the property. So they're going to have their assumptions built on what their 5-year pro forma is, how they think this property is going to perform, what their business plan is, what their strategy is. All that's going to be outlaid in this first big presentation. It's probably going to last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, plus maybe another hour of questions and answers from whoever's on the call or in that meeting. So it's a very important step. It's a very, very big milestone in a syndication's first big presentation. So if you have questions, now is the time to ask them. And anything you want. If you want them to dive deeper, if you want to have them clarify something, now is the time to do it. Because right after this, they're going to go into the subscription period, and that's what Duke's about to cover.
Yeah, so at that time, the subscription period normally begins, and all interested partners will be sent the official operating agreement, or OA, subscription agreement, or SA, and private placement memorandum, or PPM, package to review. So then at that point, you can pledge your capital or stake in the deal. Most deals are first come, first serve, so you normally don't want to wait until the last minute, and sometimes it can be a race to the wires. In other words, you've already signed your subscription agreement, but the funds haven't been wired in yet. And so at that point, it's really just whoever can wire in the funds first will get that slot. And typically in these deals, they go pretty fast, depending on the structure and so forth. So the subscription period normally ends about 2 to 3 weeks before closing, or whenever the total amount is raised. So at that point, you would wire in your funds into the designated account.
Got it. And then after that, so about 3 weeks out, the sponsorship team is really trying to tie up loose ends to make sure the closing and the turnover at the property goes as smooth as possible. So once that happens, everybody's going to wire their funds in. You may not hear a whole lot. The next time you're probably going to hear from them is that you have successfully closed and you are now a owner and a company that owns this piece of real estate. And now the fund begins for the management team. Now the asset manager can get in there, get their hands dirty, and start executing their business plan. So that'll be your first, celebration. The deal is closed. For the management team, the sponsorship team, a lot of the work has just begun for them. So all in all, this first, from the time you've been notified, the time you close, that normally happens around 60 days time frame. Sometimes it's 90 days, depending on if they had to get extension for financing or for due diligence or something like that. But normally 60 to 90 days is your average timeline to close a deal. All right, and then after that, most sponsors will be have really tight communication with their investors during that first phase of acquisition, and that's going to be from the day they close to say maybe the first few quarters after. So the first 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, depending on the level of reposition. You might have calls every month, some kind of webinar call or phone call or in-person meeting, depending on the size of the investor pool. A lot of sponsors will do some kind of newsletter as well, but you normally receive a monthly update of the progress of the deal. Here's the financials of the deal. Here's the bank account balances. Here's where we're at on certain CapEx or projects that we were implementing. Maybe they were, they had to do roofs or new balconies or new parking lots or landscaping, or maybe they had a bunch of vacant units and they're renovating those. So you'll get updates on those planned CapEx items or that business plan execution, however they have their project structured, usually monthly until the project is stabilized. Once it's stabilized, and that stabilized meaning some around 85, 90% economic occupancy, not a whole lot of turnover. The bulk of the CapEx projects are completed, and now we're just running into like kind of our smooth management groove, that nice smooth line up over the next year or 2, 3, 4 years, whatever that hold period is. Once you're stabilized, then you're probably going to switch to maybe quarterly communication, where you might get a monthly newsletter, but you'll get a quarterly phone call, a quarterly meeting, or updates like that once it's stabilized. And then that'll be pretty much the rest of the deal would be quarterly communication.
So at the end of the year, the sponsor will be working closely with the CPA and bookkeeper to close out the books and generate the Schedule K1s. So the purpose of the K1 is to report each partner's share of the partnership's earnings, losses, deductions, and credits. So you then would take this K1 to your CPA to file your taxes, because the taxes just kind of pass through to you from the partnership. All right, so if you're interested in connecting with us, go to tricityequity.com to learn more. To connect with like-minded investors, join our Facebook group, Honolulu Multifamily and more. And if you found value in this podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If you know anyone who might resonate with today's podcast, please share the episode with them. See you next time.
All right, see you, dude.